To integrate the backend with our front end, first we are going to be navigating inside our front end project, and there we are going to be installing all the dependencies first. Once the npm install has finished, then we are going to be installing AWS Amplify, and then we'll save the dependencies. The npm install has finished. The next step is installing the dependency for AWS Amplify. And AWS Amplify is basically the library that is going to help us in connecting with the API Gateway and getting the response from the API Gateway. I'll quickly give you a walkthrough of our current SRC that was created as part of the Create React app. So the root file is going to be index.js. Now if we come inside index.js, we can see that there is this element called root, and in this element we are going to be rendering a view, and that view is basically going to be presented via the app.js. If we are going to be modifying the view of our project or the view of our application, the entry point for it is going to be from app. And because we are installing AWS Amplify now as a library in our project, any configuration that we are going to be doing for AWS Amplify will be done inside index.js. Because if we do this here, then the root of our application is basically going to get the integration. So we can see that the installation of AWS Amplify has finished. I'll just show the package.json, and we can see that this green bar, which represents the new addition that we have done here, is for AWS Amplify of version 3.0.10. Now AWS Amplify has been installed, so we have done step number 2. Step number 3 says that we are going to be creating a config.js inside our src directory, and from there we are going to be exporting a default object, and that default object is basically going to be holding the information for our API gateway. So let's do this first. We navigate inside src now. We'll create a file called config.js, and inside config.js we'll export default API gateway, and this API gateway is basically going to be an object holding the region. First of all, region is going to be AP South 1, because that's the region where we had deployed our serverless stack. And then the next thing that we need is the URL. Now, how do we find the URL? The URL is actually displayed if we go back to our Lambda function. We will go inside the trigger, and we can see that API gateway trigger is already created. Now, this is the path of the whole API gateway endpoint. Therefore, the root of this is going to be until dev, because /nodes is basically the resource which is present inside this URL. Therefore, we are just going to be copying the URL up till that part, up till dev. So our config.js has been created. The next thing would be configuring our index.js. Now, the first step is we are going to import Amplify from AWS Amplify. So we do that, and also we are going to import the config that we just created. The config is now present here, and if we hover on the config, we can see that it's exporting this default object that has a field called API Gateway. Therefore, we can configure a endpoint object with the help of the config details that we had created, and with the help of this endpoint, we are going to create an array of endpoints, because later on this is going to support any more endpoint that we add for our project. And then we are going to create an API object out of it, and that API object is going to have this endpoints field that holds the array of all the endpoints that we have. After that, we are going to be simply making a call to amplify.configure function, passing in the object that we just created here. So up till this part, we have just configured Amplify. Now, let's just start our application. So I'm going to call in this command npm start, and if we go to our package.json, we can see that inside our script we have a start command registered, and if we do that, it calls the React script start, and that's the script that has been called by calling npm start. It has started my development server. Okay, and the view of this page is going to be what we have inside app.js, because index.js is the root file and it's just displaying whatever is there inside app. After our integration with Amplify is over, then we are going to be customizing our app file. So let me delete everything that is present inside app, and let's create a new file for our notes. So notes.js is going to be our new file, and inside the nodes we are going to be creating a new component, a functional component responsible for displaying notes. Now once we have this created, we can actually call it inside our app.js. It was an named export, not a default one. Now we can see that app.js doesn't have a view at this moment. As soon as we are going to call notes, it should start displaying notes. Okay, perfect. Display notes is there, and amplify.configure was successful. Yes. Let's start creating a use effect hook for our notes function so that we can actually fetch in the notes from our API gateway. Now we are going to make a call to use effect. With this use effect, we can write in an effect, followed by we can write in a function that executes with some code for the cleanup, and then we can also associate the hook's boundary with a particular state that we have. Now currently we do not have any state, so we will keep this an empty array. We can also remove this empty array, but removing this empty array will actually make that use effect to be called for every state change, and that's not something that we want. Therefore we just are going to execute the use effect right after the first loading of this page. So this is how our use effect boundary going to look like, and we do not need any cleanup for the moment, but we certainly do need an effect. Now what's the effect going to be like? Probably we are going to make a call to our API gateway, and from that API gateway we are going to fetch the data that this function is currently sending back. Okay, so this is what we want to fetch back. All right, so first of all we are going to need a function, and we will probably say this list notes. Okay, it doesn't need to take any parameter for the moment, and it's going to use a particular API object from our Amplify package. So we will import API first, API from AWS Amplify, and using this API we are going to make a get call from a named API that we have. Now what do we have? Let's say we want to call notes or something like list notes, and list notes is basically going to be calling a API which is, for our case, notes, because that's what we have here, /notes. So we will say something like this. Now whenever we are going to use api.get, the first part is basically the name that needs to be present inside our index.js. Okay, and inside index.js we already have endpoint and region. Let me add name as well. So name is going to be list notes. Okay, now there we go, we are inside now this use effect. So what we can do is we can actually write in a function which is going to be async, and probably it would be load notes and doesn't take a parameter. And once it's done, we can just say load nodes. So this is the effect that we want, and load node is going to be making a call to our list nodes. So we can say let data to be await of list nodes, and once the list nodes is successful, let me just first console.log of the data. Okay, so if this code executes fine, then we should be able to see a console log of our data. Okay, so there is an error. So what does it say? Is that we are actually making a call to Notes API. Let's open the networks tab. This Notes API has failed because when we started sending our response back, we never said any course response. The only course that we had set earlier was through our events file, right? And the events file was actually setting the course for options. But as part of our response, we also need to send the access control allow origin course, because that's the one which is failing our current network call. If we see here that we do not have access control allow origin for this moment. So what I'm going to do is, here when I'm sending the return, what I can do as part of my return object, I can also set something like header, and header can be access control allow origin, and let it be for the moment start. Yes, of course, the function is saved. Now let's make a call again. Okay, so it doesn't have the access control allow origin header yet present. Yes, it was headers, my mistake. So now we can see that our API is actually making a call and it is getting back the response. So in order to be certain, we can add one more here. Let it be 3, and the ID let it be 3 again. So now if I do a refresh again, I should instead be seeing 3 objects, and the third one is the one that we just added. A few more words about access control allow origin. So what this is actually meant for is, this is a kind of a security that we can place in our backend APIs, so that it can only accept traffics from our whitelisted front-end projects. For example, my React serverless, or this React app which is running on localhost, let's say it's currently running on a hosted domain, for example www.reactserverless.com, then whenever the browser is going to make a request, if you'd see that it will send an origin header, like where this request is originating from, and the request is originating from localhost 3000. Therefore, whenever in our backend we want to control our endpoint, we can say localhost colon 3000. So if we say this, then only requests which are originating from this particular endpoint are going to be getting a response, right? So in our case, http localhost 3000 is exactly the endpoint which is going to be sending the request. So what the change I did, instead of star, which means any domains are allowed, I restricted it to be localhost 300. Remember, I didn't say 3000. Thus, if I am going to do a refresh here, I should see a failure because it doesn't identify. Let me change it back to 3000 and save it. So now the origin header from my browser is going to match the allowed access control origin with our backend, and as a result I am again seeing the data. So now you understand the two impact of our course. Like from serverless, we added the configuration for the options course, and also from the response that we are getting from the Lambda, we added a response course. Now, instead of localhost 3000, in future I can modify it to be any a hosted domain where I'm going to be hosting my this particular front-end API or the front-end project. So that's about it. And so far we have been able to make a connect with our backend APIs. Next, we are going to be talking about how we can integrate React routers, and also we will do a little bit of customization of our font, and we will spend more time on the front end part. We'll see you next.